go live. There we go. Now it's showing me that I am live. All right. I'm just trying to get the chat up really quick. Let's see. Cancel that. For those who are here and can hear me, I hope you're having a great Saturday morning so far. I'm just taking a second. I'm still new with the live stream, and I'm just trying to get the chat up. So please just give me a second. Let's see. Let me try to go here. Thanks for your patience as I get this figured out. I'm excited to be here today and excited for what we are going to talk about today. Oh, good. So it's showing live. I think we're good. Just going to look at the chat. If anybody's there that can tell me you can hear me okay. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and get sound. Oh, thanks, Troy. Troy says sound and volume is good. So that's my thumbs up to go ahead and dive in. So how I like to do these lives. So I've got 3 topics for us today that I'm really excited to talk about. What I like to do is to go through and teach and discuss each topic. And then at the end of the live stream, I will take a peek through the chat to see if there's anything that stands out to me that would be good to comment on or a good question to answer. And that can be overwhelming sometimes because there can be a lot going on in the chat and I don't have a moderator yet. So if I don't see something right away, please know that I always take the time afterward to go through the chat. And if there is something that would be really helpful to you guys for me to answer, then I'll make sure that I do that in the comment section of this video. So that's how it'll go today. Otherwise, if I'm like looking off, I get off on tangents and I want to give you guys just the best delivery and teaching. I really consider myself a teacher. I'm not a social commentator or doing this for the clicks and views. I really am here to teach men and women and teach about the things that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to look at, that we maybe haven't had exposed, and not from a place of being victims to each other and trying to find, what are the things outside of us, like our upbringing or our past or feminism, or not looking at those things as the cause, because we don't have any control over those things. What I really teach is looking at ourselves, both as men and as women, to look at ourselves and how we can change within ourselves to change our experience in our relationships and change our experience in our marriages. Because the truth is, we don't have any control to change anyone or anything outside of us. We only have control to change ourselves. And it's when we work on ourselves and how we show up in life, how we show up in marriage and relationships, that it's only then that we can begin to have a different experience. So that is always the angle that I teach from, that I want to get across to help those who can hear my message, who are craving a different perspective and craving a solution to these dynamics that we have between us as women and men. So with all that being said, what we're going to talk about today, the 3 topics: signs that a man is unhappy in his marriage. And I'm going to speak to the ladies, and I'm also going to speak to the men in all of these topics. Then we're going to talk about why are 80% of divorces filed by the wife, and looking at a different perspective than what is currently out there. And then the 3rd topic, which is what I titled this live, is we're going to talk about emotional abuse. And I put in the title, it's spelled WIFE, because I want us as women to see our shaming, our emasculation of our husbands, of the men in our life, as emotional abuse, not to make us wrong, not to make us bad, but it's only until we can shine the light on those things that we are actually empowered to be able to change. And that was huge for me, to have to see these things about myself, because that was the only way that my cognitive dissonance of who I thought I was versus who I actually was in my marriage, seeing the truth of my behaviors as a woman when I'm unhappy and I have my walls up was the only way that I was going to change. And that's what I want women who can hear my message, who want to hear this. We have to see the truth of who we are and how we show up so that we can actually change. And so those are the 3 topics that we're going to dive into today. So let's get started. So the first one that like I said, I want to talk about is signs that a man is unhappy in his marriage. And the reason I want to talk about this topic is I do read through the comment sections, not all of the comments and on my videos, but I try to get in there and be engaged and see what's happening and see some of the questions that come up. And a gentleman just shared his experience with his wife about how he's come to accept that he will always be wrong in his marriage because his wife is always right. And I just want to read a little bit of his comment. He says, the answer can be straight in front of my wife in black and white, but if my answer matches the right answer, somehow I am wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about. It is never worth the energy and mental gymnastics needed to try and secure an agreement or even playing field. I just succumb to, yes, wife, I see where you are coming from now. You are right. I am wrong. And so, ladies, what I want us to look at and what I want us to know, why you need to know the signs of your husband being unhappy in the relationship, is that the number one sign that your husband is unhappy is that he feels that he is constantly wrong and he can never be right. And I had my experience in my marriage. Oh my gosh, my husband, when we would get in arguments, when we would fight, he would be like, I'm always wrong. I can never be right. You are always right. I am always wrong. And the men that I've worked with over the last decade, they all share the same experience. The men watching now, I'm sure, will be putting in the chat, yep, that's my experience. I'm always wrong with my wife. I'm always wrong with women. And when my husband would tell me this, it would go right over my head. And guess what? I would tell him why he was wrong for feeling that I was making him wrong, because that's what we do. And so, ladies, we have to understand that when we constantly make our husbands feel wrong, there are consequences for our behaviors. Because what happens when your husband feels wrong in the marriage, and he always feels wrong by you, that we're always telling them, oh, don't do it that way, do it this way. Or you shouldn't have that conversation with your boss, or you shouldn't do this at work. You need to come at it from this way. Or you tell your husband that his parenting is wrong and how he is with the kids are wrong. I mean, there's a myriad of ways, and covert ways and overt ways that as women, we make our husbands wrong. I'm going to get more into that in the last segment of today's live show. But when we constantly make them wrong, what you need to understand is that there are consequences for our behaviors. And I think that's the most difficult thing for us as women to understand, that there are actual consequences for how we show up in life. And there are consequences for how we show up in marriage with our husbands. And we don't want to see that because we don't want to take accountability. You can look through so many comments on my videos to see men piping up of like, women and accountability. Those two words don't even go together, because we are the last to want to take responsibility for ourselves, especially in marriage, especially in our relationships with good men, to see how we are showing up and see how we're the problem and see how we are contributing. We point the finger out and we always make it men, and we always make them the problem, and we always want to blame them. So here are the signs that your husband is unhappy in the marriage, because these are consequences of you and how you are showing up. And this is what I had to see for myself. Again, I don't talk about anything in my videos that I haven't had to see in myself. And it was when I was able to shine the light, to be called out, to see these things about myself, that I could actually change. And then my marriage changed. And that's what I want for you too. But we have to do the roll our sleeves up and do the not fun part of taking a hard look in the mirror to see what it is about us that we're creating our husband's unhappiness in the relationship. So here are the signs. If your husband drinks more, a lot of women complain about their husband drinking. And like, yeah, it's the first thing he does when he gets home, or he's drinking so much more than when we first met. That's a sign that he's unhappy in the marriage. And we're going to talk more today about where does that stem from. If your husband is working more hours, or working later into the evening. If your husband is distant and unavailable. So I hear from a lot of women complain, my husband's always on his phone. And husbands will have the same experience that their wives are always on their phone, but that's a different angle, another topic for another time. But feeling that he's always on his phone, or he's always playing video games, or he's always watching sports, or he's always doing something else, and he's completely unavailable to me. Another sign that your husband is unhappy, that he doesn't participate in household responsibilities. So he stopped being a part of the household. He stopped doing his responsibilities in the household. If you, as the woman, feel like you have another child instead of a man and a husband in your marriage, if that's how you're feeling, that's a sign your husband is unhappy in the relationship, because he's rebelling against you, constantly making him wrong, and the other things that we do that when we show up as emotionally abusive in the relationship, which we'll get into more at the last segment of today's show. And the last sign is that your husband is depressed. Another thing that I hear a lot from women, and you can look at the statistics in the US to see the rising number of depression in men and among married men. So those are the signs that your husband is unhappy. And what I want women to understand is that we believe that our husband is just withdrawing and they've checked out of the relationship, and it's something about them that they need to change. And so what we start doing is we try to work on changing our husband, thinking that we're working on the marriage and working on the problems in the marriage, which we see as these things. My husband drinks too much. He works too much. He's distant and unavailable. He doesn't participate in household responsibilities or chores. I feel like I have a child. He's depressed. And that's the reason and cause of the problems in our marriage. So as women, we try to come at it from that angle, because again, we don't want to take accountability and responsibility to look at ourselves. But what I want women to know is that it's not your marriage or your husband that is the problem. We are the problem, because we are unhappy in ourselves and we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. That's the very reason that we make our husbands wrong, is that it is a reflection and a projection of how we feel about ourselves on the inside. And we think that we can just show up, and we're entitled to show up however we want. And that no matter who we are, no matter how we treat our husbands, no matter what we do to them, that they should always be there and they should be engaged and happy and do the things we want them to do in the relationship. Life doesn't work that way. Again, there are consequences for our behavior. So when you're constantly making your husband wrong, and you have to slow down to be honest with yourself of how you do that, because a lot of you, your first fight will be, I don't do that. That's not me. But if your husband is displaying any of these signs that I talked about, it is a reflection of you making him wrong in the marriage. So it's slowing down to look at that and recognize he's not just randomly withdrawing and pulling away. It's a symptom of you pushing him away by making him wrong. And what that means, that we often fight and don't want to know, is that we have an immense amount of power to make a marriage go really, really, really good and have it thrive and be healthy, simply by changing how we show up in the relationship and letting go of making our husbands wrong. That's exactly what happened for me in my marriage, and 10 years of working with other women who all admit to this. Worked with hundreds of women over the last decade in their marriages who all know these behaviors in themselves, all know they make their husband wrong, all know they have an unhealthy relationship with themselves and don't feel good about who they are on the inside. Is the magic that happens when you start working to have a healthy relationship with yourself and be happy in yourself. And you stop pushing your husband away and you stop making him wrong. You stop emasculating him and shaming him. And you're married to a good man. Is that he re-engages in the relationship in all of the ways that he was showing up negatively in response to you goes away. And I didn't believe my mentor when he taught me this. And I threw up a fight and I dug my heels in. But when I came to accept it and I actually started to show up differently with my husband, it's exactly what happened. He started wanting to spend time together. He was eager to help out around the house. He was eager to find things he could do to support me and help me. He started drinking less. He started wanting to be around. He was available. He wasn't distant anymore. And it became crystal clear to me that the ways he was showing up was a direct result of how I was in the relationship, because the only person that changed was me. And then the whole dynamic of my marriage changed. And my husband and I continue to thrive, continue to grow together, continue to have a healthy, happy relationship. So ladies, it's up to you. And the solution and the understanding is it's not anything about your marriage or your husband. It's you and being unhappy in yourself and having an unhealthy relationship with yourself. And how you can know that is that you beat yourself up. You make yourself wrong. You're critical of yourself. You never feel enough. You put on the mask and face of who you think you need to be liked and accepted by others. You don't have a sense of self-worth or self-value. You don't feel good about yourself. Those are all the signs that we don't have a healthy relationship with ourselves. And we've never been taught that or even known that we really need that. So that's the solution. And that's what I teach women how to do. And if you only work on yourself to be happy and build a healthy relationship with yourself, and you're married to a good man, a man who's kind, loving, hardworking, responsible, the majority of you are married to good men. If you are a nice person, even if it's externally in a facade, chances are you married a nice, good man. Most of you are married to good men. And if that's the case and you work on yourself to be happy and have a healthy relationship with yourself, that's the solution to these problems in your marriage. And it's recognizing the grave effect that you have on your husband and how we can make them feel these ways just by shaming them and constantly making them wrong. What I want men to know is that being aware that your wife is making you wrong, is emasculating you, that what happens for good men is that you internalize how your wife makes you feel wrong and that you're the problem in the relationship and that it's something wrong with you, that you're drinking more or working more, that you're distant, that you're depressed, that you feel like a child in the relationship, that there's something wrong with you, that you don't want to help out anymore. And you get hard on yourself because you buy into your wife's constant shaming and emasculation. So when you can see it for what it is and recognize, oh, I've unknowingly been giving my power away to my wife, what that allows you to do is then to grow and learn from your wife's behaviors so that you can work on the weaknesses within yourself that allows the emasculation and the shaming to work. So what I teach men is you want to use the emasculation and your wife making you wrong as an opportunity to become stronger in yourself. And what happens over time is that when she makes you wrong or she's emasculating, it begins to just bounce off and it doesn't work anymore. So you don't have these symptoms of being unhappy in your marriage because you're solid within yourself. And what happens for my husband and I now, and what the best way for a good man to begin to stand up to the shaming and the emasculation in a responsible, respectful way is for you to make light of it And so I'm a woman, and I've worked really hard on myself, and I've changed so much in my marriage. But every once in a while, something will fly out of my mouth, or I'll give a look. I'm human. I'm not perfect. And now my husband just makes a joke like, hey, you want to say that a different way? Or, wow, that was a great way to make me wrong. And then I can accept, like, oh, and apologize and be like, sorry, thank you for calling it out. And then we just move on. And it's very rare that that even happens anymore, because I do take responsibility and accountability for myself now in my marriage. And that's what I want women to do. And for men, it's using these behaviors as a personal growth journey to become stronger in yourself. And what you'll notice is happens is the emasculation and the shaming happens less. And it just bounces off because you don't take it personally. I think that's what I want men to know is, do not take your wife making you wrong and shaming you and emasculating you, to not take it personally. It's not anything you are doing wrong or any defect in you. It's a reflection of her own relationship with herself and how badly she feels about herself on the inside. And when you know that, and you can begin to see and observe how that operates, then you no longer take it personally. So that's what I wanted to share, just in response to that man's comment. Thank you. How, as women, we need to recognize how we make our husbands wrong, and the unhappiness that that creates in them, in the marriage and in the relationship, and then what the solution is for women and for men, which leads me into my next topic that I want to talk about, that is also stemming from a question that somebody asked in the comments, which is, why do 80% of divorces, why are they filed by the wife? Why are they filed by women? 80% of divorces are filed by women. And why is that? So the comment that I got was, why do so many women leave their husbands simply because they are unhappy or bored? Why is it that men have the endurance of till death do us part, and yet many women have the endurance limited to their emotions like boredom and unhappiness? And I think this is a great question. And I see videos pop up all the time in this space about women leaving simply because they're unhappy. And why is that? And what's the solution to that? So what I had to see for myself as a woman, why we have such a limited endurance in marriage and we are so quick to leave and so quick to run, is because we have no concept when we get married that we are actually making a commitment to another person. We're making a commitment to ourselves, that our vows actually mean something. And that when we get married, we have responsibilities and roles to make it work. As women, we are incredibly short-sighted. And all we think about in getting married is the wedding, the dress, and the party. And we have no concept that we are actually stepping into a huge responsibility and a huge commitment that we are making to keep our word and follow through. And women will be the first to argue, my husband broke his vows. My husband does not follow his vows. He's the one that's not committed. Again, that is a projection of ourselves and our own lack of commitment in our marriage, that we have no concept that our vows even mean something, and that we're making a commitment. We want to look good, sound good at the wedding, and that's it. For us as women, marriage is the next thing that we are checking off our list of what we think will make us happy in life. It's the trap of the human pursuit of happiness that we all have. That's not a woman problem, but looking for what's going to make me happy in my life and checking off the boxes to have a good life on paper, thinking that that's somehow going to make us happy, when the truth is that happiness is an internal experience. We all know that no one and no thing can make you happy, but we've never been taught how to put that in place. So we spend our whole lives acquiring the relationships, the things, the achievements, the accomplishments, thinking those things will make us happy. And they never will. They never can, because the only one who can make us happy is ourselves. So as women getting married, and I did the same thing, it's the next step of the thing that we think will make us happy. And we believe that marriage and a happy marriage are supposed to just happen, that there's nothing that we have to do to actually make that happen, and that it actually takes work. So for us as women, as soon as it gets hard, as soon as it's not going the way that we think it should, as soon as we are unhappy or bored, we run, because we have no commitment to ourselves, and we had no intention or awareness that we actually have to follow through with the commitment that we make when we get married. We feel entitled and we feel justified to search for our happiness in spite of the commitment and responsibilities we have as a wife, and for many women as a mother. And we put our own happiness ahead of the commitment and the responsibilities that we have made. And so what happens for us as women is that we'll divorce, we'll run away, we'll break up, we hop into another relationship thinking that somehow that will make us happy, and it doesn't. And this is the cycle that we live in our whole lives. And we live in this cognitive dissonance that it's our husbands making us unhappy, that it's the marriage making us unhappy, with no awareness that it's actually you. And I had to realize it was me that was unhappy. And there was nothing my husband could do or stop doing, or anything that was going to change in my marriage that would make me happy, because that is impossible. The only person that can make you happy is you. And unfortunately, we aren't taught how to do that in life. But I was very blessed to be taught how to be happy and what happiness actually is, and that it's having a healthy relationship with myself. That it isn't anything that my husband can do or my marriage can do to make us happy. I like to look at the statistics that 50% of first marriages fail, 60% of second marriages fail, and 75% of third marriages fail. And if 80% of marriages are divorced or filed by women, it's because we're unhappy and we think it's the marriage or our husband making us unhappy. That's a myth. And wherever you go, there you are. So if you leave the relationship because you're bored or because you're unhappy and you're blaming your husband and your marriage for that, we're incredibly misguided. We're unhappy because of ourselves. We're bored because we're bored with ourselves, because we've given up on ourselves and we're not doing anything to create a life for ourselves and to do the things that are meaningful and purposeful to us. And we give that power away. I like to use the example of Tom Brady and Giselle. And I've seen some videos around on that too. I think Pearly Things has some videos on that. And it's the classic, like Tom Brady, clearly a good man, at the top of his game, makes plenty of money, just a wonderful person. And Giselle was unhappy because he played football too long, when she knew who she was marrying and what he did, that she was marrying a professional football player and top of his game. And she thought it was supposed to be different, and that he was away too much and he played football too much. So she was unhappy. So she felt entitled to leave and wreck her family. Giselle is unhappy in herself. She's a classic woman, and thinking that there's some other man out there that's going to make her happy, and that Tom Brady was responsible for her unhappiness. No. Ladies, it's us. And so the solution is to learn to be happy in ourselves. And what men need to know, this is really, really, really important, is you are not the source of your wife's unhappiness. You are not the source of your wife's unhappiness. And that there is nothing you can do or stop doing that will make her happy. Nothing that you hear in marriage counseling, nothing that she asks you to read, not speaking speaking her love language, writing love notes to her, making her feel important, doing special things for her. None of those things will make your wife happy because she is unhappy in herself. And she is the only solution to her unhappiness. And if you try to do the things you think will make her happy, she will resent it, find fault in it, and it won't be enough. And she'll find all the other things that she thinks you need to do to make her happy. So good men have to retire from trying to make your wife happy and retire from throwing your actions and feelings into an empty bucket with holes. That's never, ever going to result in your wife being happy. It doesn't mean that you can't be the kind, thoughtful, loving partner that you are, but you have to do that for yourself because it's an expression of who you are, not because you think if you do this one thing, maybe she'll be nice, or maybe she'll finally be happy, or maybe she'll get off my back about this, because you'll be disappointed and let down every single time. So the ultimate reason that 80% of divorces are filed by women is because we are selfish and self-centered. And we put our own unhappiness ahead of the commitments that we made in being a wife and oftentimes a mother. And we are grossly misguided to think that our happiness is in some other relationship or some other form of a lifestyle, because it's not. That the only way that we're going to be happy is to learn to take responsibility for ourselves, to follow through with our commitments, to do our best, and to build a healthy relationship with ourselves. And when we do, that's why I have this sign back here that says, happy women have happy marriages, because it's true. When you become happy in yourself, then that's the lens. You feel good about yourself. You have a healthy relationship with yourself. And then that's the lens through which you see your marriage, your husband, and all of life. It's so simple. So you don't need to work on your marriage. You don't need to try to change your husband. There's nothing he can do to make you happy. It's working on yourself. And obviously the things you've been doing, because you'll say, well, I've been going to therapy and I've been reading books and I do yoga. I do all the things I need to do to be happy. It's him. Those things don't work to make you happy. I was lost in all of that. I was a yoga teacher. I had a healing practice. I was woo-woo as it comes. And none of it made me happy. The only way that I learned how to be happy is to actually stop doing those things, because they were all an escape from myself. And I had to learn to take responsibility that my life and the experience of myself was a result of my choices and decisions, period. And then to learn to commit to myself to do my best and do the things that make me feel good about who I am and build my character and build my integrity for me. That's the path to happiness and having a healthy relationship with yourself. It's not sitting on a couch complaining about your past and your upbringing, or complaining about your husband. It doesn't work. The only way to be happy is to take responsibility and to stop being victims in our lives. Next. So the next topic, thank you guys for being here. If you're just joining, this is live. And I'm going to take a little segue at the end just to look through the chat box, which can be a little overwhelming sometimes because there's going to be a lot in there and it's hard to filter through. But I'll take a look and just see if anything stands out at the end to talk about. But thank you all so much for being here today. I'm really enjoying being live and being able to talk about more concepts in a depth than the other videos that I post. So happy you're here. And let's get into the next topic. So the last topic that I want to talk about today, the reason I want to talk about it is it really ties in the first two topics that I talked about. And I want to talk about emotional abuse. And I have in the title, what is emotional abuse? It's spelled, because of what I want us to see as women is that making our husbands wrong is emotionally abusive. That was the first topic. That the signs your husband is unhappy in your marriage is a result of your emotional abuse. And that as women, when we are unhappy in ourselves, we become emotionally abusive in our marriages to men. I don't know why we're wired this way. I have theories, but we are. And for me, and what I want women to know is that the only way to change is to acknowledge and shine the flashlight on the ugly parts of who we are so we can be honest with ourselves, take accountability, and actually be empowered to change. So I want to talk about how as women, how as wives, we are emotionally abusive. And not, again, not to make us wrong or bad as women, but to empower us as women, because it is the only way that we will change. So what I want to do to talk about this, I found a really, really good article on Psychology Today about emotional abuse. And what I want to do is to connect the dots. How we show up as women in our marriages is emotionally abusive. And when we look at the signs of emotional abuse and what it is, and we're willing to take a look at ourselves and our marriage, then we can see these things in ourselves. And I think it's really important to set this up to know that as women, we're on a spectrum of how emotionally abusive we are. Some women are on the high end of the spectrum, some women in the middle of the road, women are on the low end of the spectrum. And your instinct is going to want to be, that's not me. And to think, I know women and people like that, but that's not me. Because we might be thinking of people that are very overt and aggressive in their emotional abuse. But that as women, we can have a smile on our face and play nice and be calm as can be. Yet what's happening on the inside, the judgment, the criticism, the resentment will still come out in the form of emotional abuse in your marriage. So when I go through these signs of emotional abuse, you want to look for not how you don't do this, but you want to look for how you do. And it's a long list, so I won't spend too much time on each of them for just time's sake. But really slow down for yourself. Watch this again. Slow down for yourself and reflect on, how do you know each of these as yourself? How do you do these things? Even if they are in subtle, covert ways, because that's having a massive impact on the dynamics between you and your husband. So let's go through these. Well, first, what is emotional abuse? Emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior in which the perpetrator insults, humiliates, and generally instills fear in an individual in order to control them. And as women on a spectrum, this is who we are and how we show up with our husbands. We want the upper hand. We want the control. So we have shaming, manipulative tactics to control our husbands. And what happens for our husbands is and this is again part of the definition, their reality becomes distorted, and good men actually internalize the abuse as their own failings. That they actually begin to believe what their wife is doing to them is their own fault. And that's how emotional abuse works. That's exactly what we're trying to do as women, is to make our husbands believe it's them and they're the problem. That's how manipulation, shame, and emasculation work. It's a way to not have to look at ourselves. And it's a way to put the problems and responsibility on our husbands. So now let's get into, what are the signs of emotional abuse? And again, it says emotional abuse centers around control, manipulation, and demeaning or threatening behavior. And it can be subtle or it can be overt and aggressive. First one is monitoring and controlling a person's behavior. So ladies, think of, and again, I won't give examples for everyone, but checking your husband's phone constantly, reading his emails, checking his internet history, telling him who he should and shouldn't hang out with, telling him how he should parent, and all the myriad of ways that we are controlling. Number two, threatening a person's safety, property, or loved ones. When you threaten divorce and you threaten taking the kids away, or you threaten going to your husband's mother, that's emotionally abusive. Being demeaning, shaming, or humiliating. I've had many clients share with me things like, I'm so embarrassed of how I treat my husband. I actually told him that he's like a chick on her period. I actually had a client tell me, yeah, at my worst, I'll tell my husband he's being like a chick on his period. That's demeaning and humiliating. That's an extreme example. But making fun of your husband to your girlfriends and in your social circles, or making fun of him in front of his family or your family. And we do that with little comments where we think we're being funny and cute, but it's incredibly hurtful. Having jealousy and accusing your husband of wrongdoings that have no basis in reality. Delivering constant criticism and being ridiculing and teasing him. And we do know that we do that. Oh, are you going to wear that shirt? Oh, I really wish you wouldn't do that anymore. Oh, are you going to watch football again? Haven't you grown out of that? And we constantly criticize them for who they are and the things that they enjoy or the things that make them who they are. Making acceptance or care conditional on how a person, on a person's choices. So this is often how we withhold sex as women. That if you're not going to do this, if you're going to continue to be this way, then we withhold sex. Or they do something to upset us, then we withhold sex. Refusing to allow a person to spend time alone. Oh my gosh, how many of us can admit to, our husband goes to play golf or they go out with a friend or they just go out and do something and we're constantly blowing up their phone and constantly texting them. Or we throw temper tantrums when they want to go do something on themselves by themselves. So we strong arm them into not doing that. Thwarting a person's professional or personal goals. And we'll complain if our husband's working too much because he's trying to get a promotion or he's trying to build his business. And we find ways to make them fail and thwart them from their goals or tell them why they shouldn't have those goals. And then the last, or no, two more, instilling self-doubt and worthlessness, how much we make our husbands question themselves. And then gaslighting, making a person question their competence and even their basic perceptual experiences. So wonderful example of gaslighting and how as women we gaslight our husbands is they'll say, I think I shared this at the beginning, they'll say like, hey, I feel like I'm never right. You're always right. I feel like you never listen to me. I feel like you're never available and you're really busy. They'll tell us the things that are bothering them in the relationship. And our knee-jerk response is to tell them, that's not how it is. Let me tell you how you're feeling is wrong. That's crazy. That's not who I am. Ladies, that's gaslighting. When you dismiss your husband's feelings and his experiences in the relationship and make him feel like he's crazy for feeling that way, that's gaslighting. And it's emotional abuse. So those are the signs of emotional abuse. And what I want us to do as women is to connect the dots that that's who we are in our marriages. And again, on a spectrum. And instead of fighting, no, that's not me. That's my husband's crazy ex-wife, or that's my husband's crazy ex-girlfriend. That's a deflection from yourself to not have to look at yourself. What I want you to do and what I teach my students and my clients to do is No, don't fight me to see these things in yourself. Look for how they're true. And how you can know they're true right off the bat is when you get defensive and triggered when I'm talking about these things. And you get really, really angry. We get defensive. We get angry because we're being shown the truth about ourselves. And it's our defense mechanism to deflect, to not have to look at ourselves, to not have to take accountability. That's a tool I actually use in my marriage, that when I feel defensive toward my husband because he's pointing something out that is a negative behavior in our relationship that he'd like me to change. If I get defensive, that's my number one sign that he's right. So I've trained myself that when that happens and I get defensive, I don't want to know that about myself. That's my cue to say, Karen, this is true. So for the women watching, and they are out there, I'm hearing from them. For the women watching, if you feel triggered and pissed at me for what I'm saying and saying you're emotionally abusive as wives, that is your number one sign that this is true about you. Because you wouldn't get defensive, you wouldn't get pissed, you wouldn't get triggered if these things weren't true. You'd be like, oh, that's interesting. You'd be curious about yourself and curious, like, ooh, maybe I should look at this, or, that's interesting. I don't feel that I do that, but you wouldn't get pissed and triggered. That's one of the best ways to know that there's truth in the things that I share. And I have had plenty of women come to me after watching some of my videos or reading something from me or hearing me speak somewhere. And they say, oh, I was so mad at you. I was so mad. But I knew that meant there was truth in what you were saying. So you want to lean into that. You want to lean in. It's not meant to make you bad and wrong that you're emotionally abusive in your marriages. What we have to recognize is we're emotionally abusive in our marriages as women, because we're emotionally abusive to ourselves. I think, how am I emotionally abusive to myself? Think about how much time we spend criticizing ourselves and picking ourselves apart, whether it's our physical looks, whether it's our intelligence, whether it's being perfectionist and feeling like we never can do anything right, how hard we are on ourselves and how critical we are of ourselves, how we are constantly doubting ourselves and feel worthless, how we withhold from ourselves and don't give ourselves the things that we need to care for ourselves. We demean and shame ourselves. We're awful to ourselves. So what we have to understand is how we show up in our marriages with our husbands is a reflection of the relationship that we have with ourselves. And when we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves, then we project that and take that out on our husbands. It's just how we're wired. But when we can know that and we can build a healthy relationship with ourselves, that's the solution. That's the magic for your marriage. That there's nothing about your husband that needs to change. There's nothing about your marriage that needs to change. It's you that needs to change in your relationship with yourself. And so what I want men to know about this, that's really important, that you've heard me talk about before, is to know that these behaviors are emotional abuse from your wife, that you have been a victim of emotional abuse. And then when you know that and you can be aware of that, then it's your responsibility to no longer be a victim. So what I teach good men is, what is it in you, once they can see it and they recognize that they have been a victim of emotional abuse? That's step one, because good men can't see these behaviors a lot of times in their wife, or they downplay it because they don't have this in themselves. And the only way a man acts out in those signs of emotional abuse, a good man acts out in those ways, is in reaction to his wife's behavior. So if you're a good man thinking, well, I've done those things, or I get really angry and it comes out this way, you need to know that that's your response and reaction to your wife's behavior. And then once you know that that's what's going on, then it's your responsibility to no longer be a victim to it. And so you begin to use your wife as your greatest teacher, because many of you good men are married to women, maybe middle of the road of spectrum of emasculation and emotional abuse, which are synonyms, by the way. And some of you are married to women on the low end of the spectrum of these behaviors. And then some of you are married to women on the very high end of the spectrum. But many of you always, it's average, it's middle of the road. So you still, the beautiful thing about good men is you still love your wives and adore us, even though we have these behaviors. So your path and what you want to do is to recognize what is the limitations in me, the weaknesses in me, that my wife can emotionally abuse me. And then when you work and you use the emotional abuse, you use your wife as your greatest teacher to expose those weaknesses and work on yourself to become stronger in who you are and to become better in yourself. Then what happens is the emotional abuse bounces off, or it lessens because it's not working anymore. And you become stronger in yourself, where you don't take it personally and you can accept your wife for who she is. And then also see the good things about your wife. Because like I said, many of you are married to women on the middle of the road or lower end of the spectrum of these behaviors. So there's still things that you adore about her. So you can come to accept her, what I call woman ways, and then begin to focus on the good things about her. And then you use the woman ways and the emasculation as a way to grow and become stronger in yourself, to where it just starts to bounce off. And then it becomes a gift because it exposes a limitation within yourself and your own relationship with yourself, that then you can work on that. And then it's no longer a limitation and no longer a weakness. And you can't be emotionally abused by your wife anymore. So these are the things I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to take a look through the chats just to see if there's anything that stands out. Like I said before, I can get a little overwhelmed because it's just me going through the chat. I don't have a moderator yet. So it can, yeah, like I said, it can be a little much. Oh, and then I can see myself and it's delayed. That's really, really weird. So I'm just going to take a quick look, just see if anything stands out. Yeah. Oh, this is a good question. Why do women do this? As a young man, I don't see the point in ever entering into a marriage at this point. So I think that's a good question. When we don't, I think I've answered it throughout this live, but when we don't feel good about ourselves, and we don't have value in ourselves, how we're wired as women is that we feel very hurt in ourselves, and we think that it's the people and things in our lives that have caused us to have low self-esteem, to lack confidence, to feel insecure. And so we're victims and we blame. And there's a quote I really like. I don't know who said it, but it's very fairly common. Hurt people hurt people. And so as women, when we hold on to hurt and we don't know how to take responsibility and accountability for our own experience, we project our own hurt onto others. And that's where the emasculation and emotional abuse comes in a marriage. And I can understand young men feeling like, what's the point of ever getting in a relationship? And just what we want to understand is that a relationship is where we grow and learn. And it's a wonderful and beautiful opportunity to learn about who we are. And that's the purpose of a relationship. That's the purpose of marriage. And when you learn to be strong in yourself, and you learn to, in a healthy, responsible way, navigate the emasculation of a woman. And like I said, many women might be middle of the road or on the lower end. Then you begin to find a dance in marriage. And what we have to understand as humans is that we can run away from the things in life that seem unfair or challenging. But what happens when we run away from things in life, like a marriage or a relationship, because it feels challenging or what's the point? We run away from ourselves and the experience and the growth that we can have in ourselves in that context of life. And so you choose to get married or you choose to be in a relationship for yourself to grow and learn about yourself. And then what you'll find is you can begin to just accept women in their women ways and see the good things and see the positive things in the relationship, and hopefully have a woman on that lower end of the spectrum, and to learn to become strong in yourself as a man and to navigate a relationship, understanding these are just the dynamics of relationships between men and women. It's been going on for all of mankind. I'm going to do a video soon. I mentioned this not too long ago. I'll do a video soon about the different quotes through history about women and who they've been from all over the world. So it's not anything new in our society at all. It's been going on for a long time. So thank you for that question. Just kind of going through, seeing if anything else pops up. I can tell I'm getting hungry for lunch. Hi, Mona. Thank you so much for being here. If you're still here. All right, nothing's popping up right now. So I will look through these later. And if there's any that that I think would be beneficial to comment to in the video, I will. Like I said, I get overwhelmed looking through the chat because there's so much going on. So that's not one of my strengths and skill sets. So I'm going to wrap up. Like I said, I'm getting hungry. I'm excited. Just a little fun fact about me. I live in Colorado, and I'm not a huge college football fan. I was when I was younger, because I grew up in the South and grew up from a family with a lot of Gators. So I used to watch a lot of SEC football. But this year, the CU Buffs have a new coach, and their new coach, as you know, many of you already know, is Deion Sanders, who, I looked up to growing up. I would watch football with my dad. So I remember Deion Sanders, and I've had so much fun this past year watching what he's doing with the team, and the chances and the risks that he's taken and the hate that he's getting for doing things outside the box. And so I'm excited to watch the Buffs this year. They're already probably almost over with the game, but I'm excited to catch a little bit of it. So I'm going to go do that. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. I'll have more videos out this coming week. I was away for Labor Day last weekend, so I was a little slow to get anything up this week, but I'll have new videos, new shorts this coming week, and then I'll see you again next week for the live show. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for being here and for all your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'm not used to saying that all the time yet. So thank you, Mona. I saw you putting that in the chat box for me. I appreciate that. And I'll see you guys very soon. All right. Bye.